Hello and welcome once again to the DraftKings Daily Trot. I'm Big Italy 42. He is Josh Shepardson at BChad 50. And we got a nice fun slate tonight. We've got some great pitchers on the mound. We've got a Coors Field game. We've got multiple other games with 9.5 run totals. So you can pay up for pitching. You cannot pay up for pitching. You can pay for Coors. You cannot pay for Coors. Whole lot of ways to go. These are my favorite kind of slates where there's not obvious plays that everyone's on. There's not the one guy you got to have in your cash game lineups. There's a lot of creativity, and these are the slates where you can really set yourself apart if you do your due diligence and you have your research behind you.
I agree with that assessment 100%.
All right, so let's go ahead and assess these starting pitchers then. And as far as DraftKings goes, Max Scherzer, way more expensive than any other pitcher, $14,600. Put in perspective, we'll give you the top four. Price is $12,300, Keuchel $11,000, and Corey Kluber at $10,600. I mean, due to the price discrepancies, Corey Kluber, Dallas Keuchel are the two guys I'm looking at. I mean, I was looking at those guys anyway, of course. Kluber just got done mowing down this Twins team at home. Obviously, Twins team, this is a Twins team. It's a different animal at home than they are on the road. Worst road offense in baseball, but can't imagine things are going to be much different than they were 6 days ago with Kluber. So at $10,600, he seems just way too cheap for his upside. Tonight, complete games in two of his last three. And then Dallas Keuchel, there's a Detroit offense that's just bad right now. I mean, no Miguel Cabrera, Cespedes out of town. They still strike out a ton against left-handed pitching. As a team, they hit lefties fairly well, but just not a whole lot of power. I mean, their best hitter, I guess Victor Martinez hasn't been their best hitter this year. He's good against lefties, but JD Martinez hasn't been particularly good against lefties. And, I mean, Keuchel just doesn't give up hard contact. 19.5% hard hit rate. Great ground ball rate, doesn't allow home runs. I mean, that duo right there is a duo that I want in cash games.
Yeah, I mean, Keuchel piles up innings, too. He's an efficient pitcher. Got to like that. He's consistent from start to start. He keeps the ball on the ground, which is good against the threats in the Tigers lineup. I mean, the biggest threat with JD Martinez is that he reaches the seats, and you can keep him on the ground. You're going to make that very difficult, or obviously impossible if he actually keeps him on the ground. But I do think that the price tag of Scherzer does make him an interesting GPP play, just because he is so much more expensive than everyone else. It is going to cause his ownership to be suppressed a little bit. David Price, I also like him in GPPs more than I do cash games. Again, more expensive than Keuchel and Kluber, so that could hurt his ownership a little bit. But he is the shiny new toy backed by that awesome offense in Toronto, so I don't think his ownership is going to be that low. And I still feel like Dallas Keuchel doesn't quite get the attention he deserves. So I think you're going to see Price probably owned a little bit more than Keuchel. Keuchel's strikeout rate lags a little bit behind Kluber, Price, and Scherzer. So for GPP purposes, I think some people are going to maybe shy away just a little bit. And the overall season numbers for the Tigers are pretty scary against lefties. But as you noted, no Miguel Cabrera, no Yoenis Cespedes, who's now a Met. So take those season-long numbers with a grain of salt, because it's not the same team that we've seen all year with the Tigers. Looking at some other options in the bargain bin, I'll go ahead and get it out of the way. I'll give my scary GPP selection of the night, but Martin Perez at $4,200 is facing basically the hottest offense in baseball tonight. The Tampa Bay Rays have a 140 WRC plus over the last 14 days, but they've still struck out in 20.2% of their plate appearances. They are a scary offense against lefties as well, owning a 113 WRC plus, but again, they strike out a bit, 21.7%. Strikeouts aren't a huge part of Perez's game, but he can get them on occasion. He struck out 5 and 6 innings in his last start, 6 and 8 in the third innings in the start against the Giants. He's coming off of back-to-back quality starts in which he's pitched 14 in the third innings, allowing 3 earned runs, 9 hits, 1 walk with 11 strikeouts. Huge ground ball rate, which should help kind of mitigate some of the pitfalls and concerns that you have about starting him at home in a hitter-friendly ballpark. But really what I'm looking at and liking is that price tag. At $4,200, he doesn't have to do a lot. If he gives you 6 innings, allows 3 earned, if he gives you basically his last start and gets you 14.7 points, you're taking that any day of the week for $4,200, because there are some big totals. There is a game at Coors. There are some pricey aces that you can pair him with. That gives you a lot of flexibility. So certainly not saying that if you're playing one GPP roster, get Martin Perez in there, but if you're playing 5, 6, 10, 20, 40, 100. Get some Martin Perez shares, because you are going to see some people scared off by that recently hot Rays offense, but there is some upside for Perez. But in the less scary range, Robbie Ray looks pretty good against the Atlanta Braves. The Braves are not in good form at all offensively. They haven't been much of a threat this year at all anyway. And Robbie Ray's been a pleasant surprise for the Diamondbacks this year. Still think that strikeout rate's going to regress some, but he continues to defy that swinging strike rate, so something's going on there. I don't know how he's fooling these hitters and getting these strikeouts without a better swinging strike rate, but he's doing it thus far, and he's been fairly consistent. You got to like that, and the matchup just isn't daunting, and the price tag's fair at $7,500 and gives you some wiggle room to get some bats. So those are really the names that I'm looking at beyond the aces.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Robbie Ray here as well. I mean, you mentioned that strikeout rate. It's over 27% over the last 30 days. So really his biggest weakness is allowing too many home runs so far this year. But that's a pretty big ballpark in Atlanta. So, and really not a lot of power, like you mentioned, that depleted lineup. There's really not any individual hitter that you're worried about in that lineup. So I'm a big fan there. And then other options, Jaime Garcia is a guy that a lot of people are going to be on. I'm not as bullish on him as really anyone. He's almost $10,000. Not much of a difference in price between only $800 more for Kluber, $1,200 more for Keuchel. Garcia, not a big strikeout pitcher. Done a great job of keeping the ball on the ground this year, but I mean he's pitching above his talent level so far this year. And this is a Miami team that actually has some hitters that are pretty good against lefties. So I'm not saying he's a complete avoid for me, but I don't like that price at all. And if I'm playing anyone else, I don't mind. My cheap option, I'll throw out John Lamb there, $5,200. Got a great strikeout rate in the minors. He's a guy brought over in that Johnny Cueto trade. Reds expecting him to hopefully, show his upside. And he does have upside. As we know, the Dodgers, not nearly as good against lefties as righties. Most of their best bats are all left-handed. So it's going to be an interesting cheap play there to pair with one of these top options. And outside of that, though, really nobody that stands out to me. Unless you want to be... I'll give you my ultimate contrarian play for the day is Tyson Ross. He's already pitched in Coors Field once this year, faced Colorado twice actually, and he pitched pretty well. I mean, he went 5 innings. He did have 4 walks at Coors Field, but had 7 strikeouts, only gave up 2 earned runs. This is a guy that's one of the best in all of baseball at not allowing home runs. Obviously, that's an issue in Coors Field for everyone, but nobody's going to be on the guy. And, this is not a very consistent Colorado offense. And, he's a good strikeout pitcher and one of the best in the game and keeping the ball on the ground as well. So, certainly not a guy you're going to be playing often, but like you mentioned, 20-40 lineups, which is how I like to roll in GPPs. I'll have some shares of Tyson Ross in some spots.
Yeah, and the slider actually is one of the better pitches to use at Coors Field, and we know that is basically what butters Tyson Ross's bread, basically. So you pair that with his fastball, and you've got a decent combination that isn't nearly as, I guess we'll say, depressed or hurt by the thin air there as some of the other pitch repertoires and pitch mixes. It's not like he's reliant on a curveball, which is, as we know, is not a pitch you want to be reliant on at Coors Field.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So, I mean, he translates well there, and that's probably why he's pitched fairly well there in the past. Catcher options here. Derek Norris going to be a popular play against the lefty at Coors Field, and rightfully so. I mean, he hasn't been particularly good, but obviously a career lefty masher, Johan Flan, the guy that keeps the ball on the ground, but not a guy you're going out of your way to avoid. Of course, Vegas has San Diego's the highest team total on the day for good reason. But my favorite play is going to be $3,300 Jonathan Lucroy against the young Adam Morgan. Lucroy mashes left-handed pitching. He hasn't been particularly good recently, but he's cheap. He's at Miller Park against a bad lefty. So sign me up for that in the middle price range.
Yeah, Morgan's very giving to right-handed batters, and even though it's a down year for Lucroy, we have enough track record of him hammering left-handed pitching to feel pretty good about using him at Miller Park. Not a lot of other cheap options that I like. You mentioned Norris being popular. I do think that he's a good play for good reason. If Yasmani Grandal's healthy enough to be in the lineup, you can consider him, but he's much better against righties than lefties, so I don't really love that play at all. It's just another name to get in there for some different exposure, but I know there's a cheap name that you like at 3,200 facing that pitcher that you mentioned not being a huge fan of. Why don't you go ahead and shed some light on him?
Yeah, I've got JT Realmuto as one of my favorite tournament options because I do think that Jaime Garcia will be a fairly popular play because he has pitched well. And like I said, not to say that he's a guy that I'll be picking on a ton, But JT Realmuto's a guy that's been smashing left-handed pitching so far this year. And he's got a ton of power. I mean, he showed it in his last game, which probably is going to keep his ownership a little higher than I'd like it to be in GBPs today, because that game he had a home run, a triple, 6 RBIs. But as an under-owned catcher, he's got really, really good numbers against left-handed pitching this year. So far this season, he has a 243 ISO and 395 WOBA against left-handers. So, I mean, it's not a situation where you want a ton of bats, but at a catcher position that, despite being a full slate, is not particularly deep, he's got a ton of power.
Yes, he does.
Any other guys you like here, or are you ready to move on?
I'm ready to move on to first. Catcher just is not a position to really get super creative at tonight, I don't believe.
Yeah. Oh, I guess I should mention the BVP of the Brian McCann versus David Price. Everyone says he owns him. Done pretty well, 9 for 19 in his career. So if you're the BVP guy, we did your research for you. There you go, Brian McCann at catcher. First base options, Paul Goldschmidt against anyone is a great option. Julio Teheran, obviously much more giving to lefties than he is to righties, but Goldschmidt, of course, in play at any time. Going to be more of a tournament option, of course, tonight with some elite pitching on the mound. But some other options, I do like Chris Davis against the lefty and Mills.
Yep.
He's one of those guys, he strikes out a lot. You tend to think he needs the platoon advantage, but he actually has very good numbers against lefties this year. So I think at $5,000, going to be very, very under-owned, despite being at home at Camden against a bad lefty, and especially because it is a lefty-lefty matchup. So that's a spot I'm looking at also. And then as you're looking down a little bit more, Eric Hosmer just continues to be a great GPP play. Nobody ever seems to target this guy. Seems to be under 10% every night, but he's having a hell of a season. He's batting .318, got 13 homers, 2 of those in his last 3 games. $4,100 against Jared Weaver, who, as we all know, Weaver struggles to keep the ball on the ground, struggles to keep the ball in the ballpark. So Jared Weaver is certainly a guy that I'm going out of my way to pick on tonight.
Yeah, something I want to bring up in relation to Chris Davis. We're talking about an absolutely tiny sample size with Brad Mills, but since 2013, so basically 2013 and 2014, since Mills hasn't been in the bigs this year, he's faced 33 left-handed batters. He's allowed a 629 WOBA. He's allowed a staggering 18 of the 33 batters to reach base, 2 hit by pitch, 3 walks, 13 hits. He served up 3 home runs, and 17 of the base runners 17 of the left-handed batters he's faced have come around to touch home plate and score a run. So he's not missing. He hasn't missed bats against lefties in the big league level. Just 4 strikeouts, and he's been hit pretty hard. I mean, again, that's a tiny sample size, but there's a reason Mills has been in the minor leagues most of the year. He's not a big bat misser, and we know the biggest problem with Chris Davis is his strikeout rate. So if he's facing a pitcher that struggles to avoid contact, that's not good news for that pitcher when Chris Davis steps into the box. But some other names that I'm looking at first base, I like Prince Fielder against Nate Carnes at home. Fielder's really having a resurgent season coming off of that injury-plagued 2014. And then Joey Votto, it's a lefty-lefty matchup. It's hard not to like Votto in any matchup, though. He's been very good this year. And beyond that, the other names that I'm looking at first base actually hold eligibility at other positions that I like, so we'll go ahead and leave them for those positions where I feel more comfortable playing them.
Okay, yeah, there's a couple of guys that I was thinking as well, but that's a good point. We'll leave them because they're better served elsewhere. You want to get your top bats at first base when you can. Second base options, it's not a particularly deep position today as far as the top goes, at least. My favorite play is Logan Forsythe against the lefty. The guy has just absolutely destroyed left-handed pitching. I know that Perez is your dark horse, and rightfully so. He hasn't allowed a home run yet in small sample size this year, but Logan Forsythe, even the best of them. He took Chris Sale deep around a week ago when he faced him, so he's hitting everyone. I love him. I know there's a guy at 4K that you like, second base, third base eligible, that you think is going to be a lower-owned guy.
Yeah, I think he's going to be one of the lower-owned options at Coors Field tonight, and that's Jed Jerko. He gets Johan Flende, so he gets the lefty matchup at Coors, and you got to like that. And going back to Forsythe real quick, he does hold first base eligibility. You and I talked before the show. Could get creative and stick him at first base because he's going to be more popular used at second base. But, he was one of those mystery players that multi-eligibility on here that I was teasing. I think in GPPs, Ian Kinsler makes for an interesting contrarian play. He is facing Dallas Keuchel. You and I both love Dallas Keuchel tonight. But if you're going to run multiple tournament entries, Kinsler's ownership usually would be sky high against the lefty, especially with him in good current form. But I think because he is facing an ace, and understandably so, gamers aren't going to be as bullish on grabbing him, which, lower ownership, when you can get him against the lefty, that's a good play. Robinson Cano looks great against Joe Kelly. Kelly's been lost this year. Kelly's coming off of a very good start, but we've seen a lot more bad Joe Kelly this year, and I feel pretty good about using Robbie Cano against him in a more hitter-friendly venue at Fenway Park than he's used to playing at Safeco Field for his home games. And then Colton Wong is the other name that I'm looking at second base, 3,800 against Tom Kohler. He'll hold the platoon advantage. And then if you're looking in the slightly cheaper range, I like Rougned Odor against Nate Carnes at home. Odor's been dropped in the order, which is baffling. I mean, he's been raking, so I'm not sure why he's not a table setter. But if he continues to hit down order, should hurt his tournament ownership, which obviously should hurt his ownership in general, which obviously is appealing in tournaments. If you're getting a guy with a high ceiling that's low owned and they deliver on that high ceiling, it's all that much more valuable. And then Wilmer Flores and Cesar Hernandez, 3,300 each. Flores gets another lefty tonight. J.A. Happ, not a good lefty either. And Hernandez is going to hold the platoon advantage against Willie Peralta, who's been super giving to left-handed batters.
Yeah, and I mean, even the two other Philly lefties that are eligible here against Willie Peralta, Chase Utley and Odubel Herrera, both guys multiple. Well, Utley not, but Odubel Herrera also has outfield eligibility. You can play him as well. I got one more guy for you, $3,600 Neil Walker, hitting the ball really well in the second half. Gets Bartolo Colon, who struggles against lefties and hasn't been too good against righties either this season. So Neil Walker, another one of those guys, seems way too cheap for this matchup.
Yeah, and you have to like lineup spot too. He's one of those second basemen that get to hit in the top 5 of their lineup, and that's always a plus. I mean, Walker's been bounced around a little bit. He's hit cleanup some. He's hit 5th. He's hit 2nd. But one way or the other, you can pretty much be guaranteed that he's going to be hitting a top 5 spot in that lineup.
Yeah, absolutely. And then third base option brings us to one of my favorite tournament options, and that's Josh Donaldson. He's $6,000. We all know how good Josh Donaldson is at home. We know how good he is against lefty. He gets a righty tonight, but that doesn't scare me off him. Due to his ownership levels, I mean, he's going to be low owned because he's insanely expensive. Most expensive hitter on the board by quite a bit, actually, I believe. And I guess only a couple hundred over some of these outfielders. But $6,000 against an average, maybe slightly above average at best, righty and Ivan Nova. Love Donaldson tonight for tournaments. And then as you're looking down, there's two guys in particular I'm looking between. Similarly priced, Evan Longoria and Todd Frazier. Both guys crush lefties. Both guys get a lefty today. I think I slightly prefer Frazier and his ridiculous 404 ISO against lefties this year.
Yeah, you got to love that ISO. I mean, he's hammered lefties. And Dodger Stadium, while it does have some run-suppressing tendencies, it does amplify home runs, and that's obviously the calling card for Todd Frazier. A few other names that I'm looking at, Manny Machado gets a lefty. I liked him a little bit better when Chris Bassett was initially projected to be the starter, but still take him against Mills. As I said, there's a reason that he's been in the minor leagues this year. He hasn't forced the A's hand. Now that they've done a lot of moving and shaking, they're having to call on some of these minor league arms. You're getting a below-average big league starter against Manny Machado. You sign up for that all day, every day. Matt Carpenter against Tom Kohler. Carpenter's been raking since he was reinserted as the leadoff hitter. Gotta like that lefty-righty matchup. And then I think for contrarian purposes in tournaments, I like Alex Rodriguez at $4,000 at Rogers Center. Price is going to be a super popular arm tonight, and for good reason. But that Yankees lineup can hang some runs, and they do have some power hitters sprinkled up and down. A-Rod obviously being the biggest power hitter in that lineup. I guess arguably the biggest power hitter. You could also throw Mark Teixeira's name in there, but Alex Rodriguez hitting the ball a long way, hitting lefties, hitting righties this year. Gets a lefty tonight, and Price has done a great job this year. He's been great since he was dealt for by the Blue Jays, but still A-Rod, anytime that you can reach the seats with one swing of the bat, you got to like that for contrarian purposes.
Certainly. I'm on board with it. He's going to be very low owned. And another guy I've got, last guy for me, Mike Moustakas at $3,200 against fly ball pitcher Jared Weaver. He's another third baseman for cheap with some power.
Yeah, and I'll add one more name as well, and that's going to be Kyle Seager for $3,700. Again, I like getting a piece of Joe Kelly whenever you can, whether it's lefties, whether it's righties. We know for Seager's sake, he's certainly much happier seeing a righty on the hill than a lefty, and Kelly's been giving to lefties throughout his career, so really like Seager tonight as well.
Yeah, good call there. Moving over to shortstop, you've got your three most expensive guys. We know the drill with Carlos Correa and Troy Tulowitzki. Both guys get righties tonight. You prefer both guys against lefties, but I'll play either one of them in this spot. Tulo still seems too cheap. Correa, $5,000, a little bit pricey. And Alfredo Simon has been better against righties than lefties, but this guy's hitting the ball harder than anybody in all of baseball. I'll tell you one guy I will not be paying for is Jose Reyes. I just don't feel like he has a lot of upside today. If he gets on base, certainly he could have stolen base upside against Tyson Ross, who allows a lot of stolen bases. But, I mean, this is Jose Reyes hasn't even been making an effort on the base paths recently. In his last 10 games, he's 1 for 3 in stolen base attempts. So it's not like the guy hasn't been getting on. He's gotten on in all but one of those games in the last 10. So if he doesn't have that stolen base upside, I don't really see much power upside. I think I'd much prefer the ex-Rocky and Troy Tulowitzki around that price. And then if not him, I mean, Johnny Peralta, yes, Tom Kohler is more giving to lefties than righties, but Johnny Peralta still has a great WOBA against righties. He's just a rock-solid cash game play.
Yeah, I agree with that assessment, and I do think there are a few cheap options that look pretty good as well. Xander Bogaerts gets the lefty and Mike Montgomery at home. Love Bogaerts against lefties. Love his lineup spot. Love the fact that Fenway Park is a hitter-friendly venue. And then one of the hottest hitters on the planet over the last 30 days, Jung-Ho Kang, gets Bartolo Colon, who we know we've mentioned is much better against righties than lefties, but Gong's been hitting everybody, and I'd say a guy with a very limited arsenal like Colon is probably a pretty favorable matchup for Gong, even though it's not in a hitter-friendly venue, and it's, again, not holding the platoon advantage as a left-handed batter or anything, but still like Gong's price tag at $3,500. He's just really thrived as an everyday regular since being thrust into that position. And then another friendly reminder that Wilmer Flores and Cesar Hernandez, who we highlighted at second base, are also shortstop eligible.
Yeah, absolutely. And then one more guy who had a huge game last night, and he's actually been raking against lefties. A 293 ISO on the season. Eugenio Suarez, since taking over for Zach Cozart. I mean, Cozart was having a fine offensive year, but if you ask me, Suarez having an even better one. $3,100 gets Alex Wood. Alex Wood's a fine pitcher in his own right, but fine is about as good as he gets. He's not a great pitcher, so not a guy that I mind picking on with pretty hot bat right now.
And you got to love the price tag. $3,100 is super cheap for Suarez.
Yeah, especially if he bats second again like he did last night. Definitely a nice value there. Outfield options. We do have Nelson Cruz as your most expensive hitter. If he's in, you got to love him at Fenway against Joe Kelly. I haven't really seen word today whether he's going to be back in or not. They said he has had neck spasms. Kind of tend to think that's going to be more in a few days, so maybe he doesn't play tonight. But $5,800, it's not like he's going to have much ownership anyway. So the guy that probably will have more ownership, Justin Upton's $5,700, seems really pricey, but this is a guy who struggled at the beginning of the season, really starting to turn it around. I mean, he's been stealing bases, been hitting home runs. Now he gets a lefty at Coors Field. That's the dream scenario for Justin Upton. So maybe people will be scared off by his price tag, but I will not be. I like Justin Upton a ton tonight.
Yeah, I like Justin Upton a lot, and then the guy priced right behind him is $5,500 white hot Carlos Gonzalez. I mean, he was having a down year, and then all of a sudden the light switch went on within the last month. I don't know if he got healthier, if he just ironed out some kinks in his swing or what, but he's been a man on fire, and gotta like him, even though it is a matchup with Tyson Ross. Usually you want your speedsters in there against Ross because he's so giving on the base paths, which brings us to his teammate Charlie Blackmon. Maybe an even stronger play at $700 less. We know that Blackmon is a base thief when he gets on, and Ross is absolutely dreadful controlling the running game. But Carlos Gonzalez has taken pretty much everybody and their brother deep. So even a guy that does a good job of keeping the ball on the ground and keeping the ball in the park like Tyson Ross might have some trouble with cargo tonight. Lorenzo Cain against Jared Weaver looks pretty good. Yep. Not holding the platoon advantage there, but he is getting a fly ball pitcher, and Cain has tapped into some power that we just have not previously seen from him. So you got to like him. A couple of $4,700 outfielders I like quite a bit. Ryan Braun against Adam Morgan at home. Miller Park, home run friendly venue. Adam Morgan, super giving to righties, and Ryan Braun, a lifelong lefty nightmare basically. Bryce Harper gets Matt Cain. This isn't peak years Matt Cain anymore. He's giving up a lot of hits, giving up a lot of contact, and Harper, when he makes contact, it tends to be very loud contact. So we like that matchup here on the pod. Adam Jones, nice price. Because initially Chris Bassett was listed as the starter, or expected to be the starter. I shouldn't say listed. He was never on the MLB probable page. But with that righty-righty matchup, Jones's price tag checked in at $4,200. Now he gets a lefty, and he gets a slight discount because the initial projection was for him to face a righty. So gotta like that price discount. Probably my favorite play in the outfield, though, is going to be in more of a bargain price range, and that's $3,900. Gregory Polanco against Bartolo Colon. You want to talk about finally, I mean, I shouldn't say finally, he hasn't even played 2 full big league seasons, but he's really starting to flourish and show off why he was such a highly touted prospect. The speed was been there all year, but starting to tap into the power, pushing near 200 ISO over the last 30 days, and turning on everything, and you got to love the lineup spot, hitting leadoff for the Pirates, who hung a big number last night on St. Louis and can really get going when they're clicking on all cylinders. And then looking a little bit cheaper, more of a GPP only play, but I'm going to pick on Adam Morgan a little bit more. I like how you call him Baby Crush. We're going to look at Chris Davis here in Milwaukee. $3,600 is a nice price point for a guy with that kind of power. And my favorite bargain player at any position, Preston Tucker against Alfredo Simon. Simon is so bad against left-handed batters. Preston Tucker has been fantastic in his rookie year against righties, yet he is priced at just $3,300. It feels like that's almost an oversight at this point. He's been hovering around $3,300 to $3,800 for the vast majority of the season, and I don't know what else he has to do to get a price bump, but as long as he's not getting it, I'm certainly pretty happy with that. And one more sneaky price discount, I guess we'll call it, in the same line as Adam Jones. Anthony Desclafini was initially listed as a starter, and that was on MLB.com. So initially the Dodgers were facing a righty, and Scott Van Slyke's price tag reflects the fact that they were originally facing a righty, and now they get a lefty. He's just $2,700. Van Slyke's been a monster throughout his career against left-handed pitching. You can get him at $2,700. That's a hell of a bargain.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, tons of upside there. And then another platoon guy here, Johnny Gomes, if you're not playing Robbie Ray, $2,400. All he does is hit left-handed pitching hard. Kike Hernandez at $2,400. If he's in the lineup, you expect he will be. That's not a very healthy. Well, I should say Justin Turner will be back today, so maybe it's not a guarantee that he's in. But if so, at $2,400, you got to like him as a cheap option. And then teammate of Preston Tucker, one more guy I want to mention here with some power. Yep. Colby Rasmus is another guy that's just really cheap, $3,400. And, Tucker, not a popular play, but people know him more than they know Rasmus. So maybe you get Rasmus and his power free, a little bit less of an ownership than Tucker tonight.
Yeah, and I got to goat you into it. There's one more outfielder that you like if he's over his illness. He's $2,900. He's facing Willie Peralta. He's at Miller Park. He is Don Brown.
Yep.
I mean, great park factors for homers. Willie Peralta's been just lost against left-handed batters this year. It really hasn't been good against lefties throughout his career. So if Brown's back in the lineup, another guy that we like in GPPs, and really great salary relief on a day that you need some of it. If you're going to roster these top pitchers, if you're going to roster some of these bats at Coors Field, you need some of these sub $3,000 priced guys, and you want the ones that have the upside in GPPs because, I mean, sure, it's great if you get a handful of points out of a guy that costs under $3,000, but what a boon when you're able to get a home run from somebody like that.
Yeah, and I mean, the good thing is that when he was missing time, like you said, it was an illness, it wasn't an injury, so you don't have to worry about him working back from an injury. And then one more guy I did mean to mention earlier, David Peralta, if he is back in the lineup, and he should be because he pinch hit a few days ago. Got that little day-to-day tag by him, so I think he's in a great spot as well tonight against Julio Teheran, who's not only a fly ball pitcher, but pretty terrible against left-handed batters.
Yep.
All right, that's going to wrap things up. Thanks for hanging out with us. Find us on Twitter at DF Cafe. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, and check out all of our great content at dailyfantasycafe.com.